Right. So, little intimate sharing, just anything that will help us to understand our children a little more, a little better is always most welcome. So, what we will do in the next 45 minutes or so, 1 hour, is to understand our children a little better. And initially, everybody has a way of looking at our children. At least we have far moved from looking at children as our own properties, because earlier as children we belonged to our parents. At least that trend has changed. Well, if they don't belong to us completely, I think you can keep your videos on. We are not many people, so if I can see you, then it will be easier for me to interact. That way I can also see that Shaker doesn't quietly slip out and start munching away. So I will be keeping an eye on Shaker. And Chitra, don't give him anything to eat for the next 45 minutes, okay? So it is interesting. One question, how do we look at our children? So there is a child, well, it happened, and how am I supposed to look at my child? So we'll go for a quick round of sharing, starting with Devapriya. So Devapriya, when you look at your child, how do you feel? Or what is the responsibility that you have? Is it your responsibility that they become somebody who is, making his or her mark in the world? Are they your property, which you will have to fine tune? Like, are they your painting, which you have to finish it, add colors, which will make you happy?
No, no, no. I don't think so like that. No, no. As
So,
you said, no, no. I don't think so. They are my property. I never think of like that.
okay,
So
whose property are they?
it's only our responsibility. It is. They are the children of now. As I'm into mother, so I feel they are mother's children. So it is.
And
I
interesting, why I asked you is, how can we feel ourselves responsible for something that doesn't belong to us? Like, it is like saying, I'm responsible for this nation. Well, the nation is not in my hands, isn't
yes,
it?
yes,
And
yes.
yet it is not completely true, isn't it? That is where, somewhere, if I say that, well, I'm not responsible for my nation, somewhere that also doesn't seem okay. So how
Yes.
much are we responsible? Now, that is a good question.
See, at present, they are with us. So I feel it is our duty to teach them what you have to do, what you're not. You can guide, that's it. You can guide, that's it. Then it's up to them to choose what they want, what is the inner call for them. I
Very
feel it is,
nice. And you have a list of things which you want to teach them?
of course. Yes, it's there.
Share with us a few things.
With regard to both my kids' patience, first thing, that is the my God, that too with Ashmita, really struggling the intolerance with her
Yes.
tall. At least my son has little bit, but Ashmita, not even a single second she can't be tolerant. So that thing is very, very. I feel that I should teach her that first.
Okay. How can we teach children to be patient?
That's the big challenge for me. Yes, I have
But
I take it from you.
well, we will see. So we'll go to Shekhar and Chitra. How do you look at your children, and how much do you feel are your responsibility? Where does your responsibility end? Ashmita almost say that as long as they are with us, our responsibility. After that, we kick them out. Well, it's a lot to learn from the animal kingdom. And interestingly, initially, the animals ensure that the fundamentals are fine, and then they kick the children out. So I'm not sure if Ashmita is going to do that, but she says as long as they are with us, it's our responsibility. So what about you, Shekhar?
Uh, Sir, initially I had a list what I need to teach Abir, what I need to do with him. These are the skill sets he should have. These are the
Hmm.
qualities he should have.
Hmm.
But when we started this journey of homeschooling
Huh?
and got and the integral education program, So these two things and our constant visit to Pondicherry and going deeper into homeschooling, actually I only have restricted myself, although yes, I am not 100% into that still. I'm trying my
Okay.
best. But still something, the old Shekhar comes at between, then I have to tell him ki chup बैठो अंदर से तो हो जाता है. But the basic thing that I normally see is he should be hygienic, he should be courteous to people, and he should be caring for people, which he's already has. Wherever with his upbringing of age as a boy, as a person, whatever things that I feel value-wise and morally-wise, I should tell him on his acts and deeds, and more or less, rather than telling him, I just ask him whether he's doing right or wrong. So,
Okay.
so my technique has moved from saying you have to do this, rather than I have slightly, I would say, I have changed my thinking. Okay, have you done this right? If I need to give him some moral lesson, then I have not. Earlier, I used to say you have done wrong. You have to do like this. Now we have a dialogue. So that's what I personally feel. As a responsibility, I used to say it's a responsibility, but I don't have still a better word. But initially, I don't go with that word. I'm a person who is elder to support him, whatever he wishes to, whatever way I can support, and help him out to understand what's wrong and right in terms of societal things, in terms of moral values. रेस्ट अब वो मेरी लिस्ट जो लॉन्ड्री लिस्ट मेरी थी वो मैं उसके सामने रखी हुई है. ऑनेस्टली आई वुड लव कि वो करे, लेकिन अब मैं वो प्रेशर नहीं करता या मैं अपने आप को खून नहीं जलाता हूँ चीजों में. So वो थोड़ा I think I'm at better at peace in last 1.5 years rather than yes, 2 years back I was not. I had a list. I'll be honest. Last 1.5 years I'm better at peace. Have I improved full? No. So it is less of him, more of me working on myself.
Okay.
Love.
चित्रा, कितना रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है तुम्हारा
खाने के अलावा?
नहीं, एक्चुअली मैंने कभी उसको शुरू से ही मतलब आई हैव नेवर कमांडेड हिम. आई हैव ऑलवेज मतलब मुझे जो कभी चीजें गलत लगती हैं तो आई ऑलवेज सिट विद हिम एंड आई काउंसिल हिम और समझा देती हूँ कि ये जो था ये ठीक नहीं था, ये जो आपने बोला ये ठीक नहीं बोला, ऐसे नहीं करना चाहिए था, बाकी आपकी मर्जी. ये भी बोल देती हूँ बाकी आपकी मर्जी, ठीक नहीं लगा. So I've never commanded him. I'm not a very strict mother, you can say, and
okay.
I always talk to him as I'm talking to a friend.
Okay. Suppose when he starts demanding, how will you meet? For example, if he says, I want a pet, what will you do?
I want a bed.
Pet.
Okay, he already
Puppy.
says. So
Already?
पेट का ये प्रॉब्लम है कि हमारे जो इन-लॉज हैं, they are not very comfortable with it, and Shekhar is also not comfortable with it. And what I feel is, as he's growing, we have to keep constantly telling him about his hygiene, how to keep things properly, how to clean around the table and everything. So right now we are training him for that, you can say. So I tell him that when you are responsible to keep a pet, then you keep, because it is too much for me to take care of a pet also, because I have my work.
Interesting, Chitra. Which comes first? First one becomes responsible and then one gets pet, or by getting the pet, one becomes responsible? Now, this is an interesting question, because when I used to interact with a lot of married people, just married, not yet started thinking of having children, the general question is they are scared of having children because, you know, it's a being, it's a living being comes, and my mom used to take care of 4, 5 aram se, but I have never really, I'm not confident enough, and therefore unless and until I am confident that I can take care of a child, then I will not be thinking of having a child. This is the usual statement I come across. But when I interacted with the mothers who have just given children, and then 3, 4, 5 years, then I asked them, they said all the theories and everything which I have gone through in form of training, nothing is actually really taught me how to take care of a child. having a child, the child taught me how to love him. When I looked at him, love flowed from me towards him. I never knew that much love I had. I never knew I can take care of one person, no, 24 hours like that. We don't take care of even our husbands 24 hours. But when the child is there, the child draws out the responsibility from us. You know, we may be having 5 6 other hobbies, but once a child is there, we learn to organize our everything else centering around him, because we have to take care of him. In a certain sense, having the child and then going through the experience also teachers. So which way? So when you're talking about pet, does Abir will have to become responsible, verify, prove himself, and then he gets one, or by getting it, he will become responsible?
Actually, I also had a pet when I was in school. So I know
Oh.
how it works. I used to take him for walk. I was responsible for his vaccinations and everything. So I was
Yes.
I mean, I was in 10th or 11th, 9th or 10th grade.
Uh-huh.
So I want him to like grow up little big till that age. So that by that time he will be knowing how to maintain hygiene of everything. I mean, for himself, for the pet. So and right now nobody is comfortable basically.
It
Even
is, hold
our
on. So it is very interesting because, you know, we as parents, you have had a pet, you have gone through the experience, and therefore you, based on that experience, you
and
would
plus
like to take decisions for your child probably. And it is very valid. Otherwise, how are we supposed to arrive at a conclusion? Now, it is an important point. Hold on to it because we will be taking it up. How our past conditions and our past way of looking at things may or may not be applicable to these particular beings, human beings, you know, little human beings. If they are coming from the same place and space you and I have come from, probably. But we will take a look at it in our next slide. But before that, Devin, so how do you look at your child? Who are they?
It's a good question because it evolves, no? I think the way how my understanding of who am I evolves, how I look at the
Yes.
child evolves. I think in the last few years, coming in touch with Sri Aurobindo and Mother's teachings,
Mhm.
I think it has shifted from looking the child as a soul in evolution, which has
Yes.
really come with its own past conditioning, and it has the child has, like my daughter, she has her own swabhava, which I need to realize and respect, and she
Mm.
has come with her own swadharma also. So
Mm.
I think a lot of that shift has come to really look at, and hence all none of the actually the dreams or anything has dropped. I think all I need to do is just facilitate the flowering of her, whatever her Swadharma is, her Swabhav is. And I think a lot of learning just happens through observing. So the responsibility that we are talking, I think that is important as parents. If we have brought a soul, into life, then certainly it's a responsibility. But a lot of it I've seen happens of how I live my life or how, Shalini lives. So I think we just have to embody. If we want her to, be neat and tidy, then we have to be neat and tidy, and automatically, it kind of reflects. So I think a
It's
lot of the
interesting because the discussion with Chitra is leading us to one particular thing. How much of my experience with myself helps me to determine what should be or what must be for my child? For example, if I had a pet and my experience was very bad, the other ways I had a pet and the experience was good. How much of is it helpful in deciding what could be or what must be or should be with my child?
I'm not sure whether I got the question.
So how much of my past experience helps me in
Hmm.
deciding what should be or what must be for my child?
Okay. So, like taking this pet example, I've not had a pet, let's say, growing up, but when she asked for
You
a,
have missed out on a whole lot of fun, huh?
yeah. So, when she asked about a year ago that she would like to have a pet kitten, So we said, fine, we've not had, but you will need to take care. So there was a friend whose cat had just given baby kitten. So we said, you kind of take for a couple of weeks. She was okay by sending, and you see whether it's like taking care of a baby. Are you able to
Yes.
really take care of it well? Then you keep. We are happy to support. And she tried, and she realized that she's not ready for it.
That
So-
is nice.
So it's like not saying no, because we are unsure. At the same time, not saying, okay, let's take it, and then so I think that's what we do, that we don't restrict based on my own conditioning, but at the same time
Okay.
we also kind of make sure that the child is ready. And I think the last point, I think, in terms of responsibilities, I think what's important is creating an environment, or choosing what environments do we kind of expose the child to, because who she meets, who she interacts with is going to be key in her learning. So I think that's another part, how we live, and then what environments do we kind of expose the child.
Excellent. So we have two things which appears to be contradictory, but they are not actually contradictory if we look at differently. One, we cannot say that my past experience is absolutely worthless when I am dealing with my children. So I'm not going to go with my past experience and then I'm going to go all out crazy. Doesn't seem to be okay. And the other viewpoint also doesn't seem to be good. One, past experience is worthless, not okay. Second one, I'm going to take decision based on my past experience, also doesn't seem to go well, because the child is not me, and he is not from the time and the environment which I have gone through, and therefore he is coming with his own needs, temperament, requirements, which could be very different from me too. So we hold both of these thoughts and we will see how do we resolve it. One, am I supposed to take care of and decide for my child based only on my experience? Because they are worth something. The other one, can I disregard them completely, which also doesn't seem to be proper. So we are in a situation which is a little bit of a dilemma. And this is where I thought I will share with you all what Khalil Gibran has shared with us. How do we look at a child? This is a very famous poem that he has written. You would have come across it. And if not, I think it is time that we got introduced to this beautiful poem. I'm just going to just have a quick check with you. And Chitra and Shekhar, have you read this poem by Khalil Gibran?
Shraddha, which one?
There, I'm showing it on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
On children.
Yes, I have been.
Beautiful poem. And Devin, you must also have come across this.
Yes.
It's a beautiful one, and it is worth going through it again. And as we go through it a little deeper, a lot of things get resolved within us. So to my previous question, who are the children? They are not my property. And the immediate question which get answered is they are not my children. As direct as that. Now you and I will hesitate to say that, no, these are not my children, because it means something else when we say these are not my children. But here is a special sense in which Khalil Gibran says, and the first word and the first sentence is very categorical. So categorical that it jolts us out of even a common sentence that, hey, he is my child. And how much this sentence has to seep in before we can say, as Ashmita said, I am looking at my child as mother's child too. So I am also mother's child. My child is also mother's child. But when I say my child, even that sentence undergoes a profound transformation, the way Khalil Gibran puts it. And the first thing hits us right and square. Your children are not your children. And then who are they? Beautifully. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. Now, every living being has an inherent inbuilt longing to be something, to express something. And that longing is in the form of bringing out something which is already hidden. What all we are doing in the outside world is to see how much we can facilitate so that this longing which is belonging to life itself is fulfilled. So when we look at one child, two children of ours, the child has already come with a longing, with a want. And this wanting is not ours. We should be very careful to avoid that this is our own wanting and our own longing. We are not imposing on the child. And once we are able to do that, then we are looking at a child as an entity, as a living being who is an expression of the life's longing for itself, not for anybody else. The child is there not with the idea that we take care of the child so that in when we get old, somewhere child will be taken care of. That may be, but it is not with that idea, not as part of our own longing that we look at a child, but they are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. And in our spiritual way of looking, we say they are the direct expression of the divine. Now, they come through you, but not from you. We are just an occasion for them to come through, and that is it. And if we were not available at that time, the child would have born to somebody else and somewhere else. As simple as that, because it's not we who decide to have the child, it is the child who decides to have us. Now, this is so important. We don't have to fit the child into our life. In fact, the child has chosen to fit both of you as parents into his life. And he will eventually, as he grows up, figure out a little more. So the first thing is, it's not we who have taken a decision to have him, but it is he somewhere deep within him has taken a decision to have us. And therefore already a little bit of, a silent interview has already happened. Okay, is Shekhar fit to be my dad? Kind of seems to be okay. More than 50%, at least not fail mark. So he's kind of okay. Chitra, okay. Devin, chalega. So, and a little bit of scrutiny has already been done. So this is an important thing, because at sometimes when they are throwing such a tantrum, and we might even think that, I can't see anything in him that can connect me to him because he's being such a tantrum fellow. Immediately we will have to bring back, because the initial interviews and pass mark has already been given. And it is because the child saw us fit to be his or her parents that we have become as parents. So Ashmita, we don't really have to think that, am I being qualified? I don't know how to do it. Well, consult the person who interviewed you, and there is a way to consult it. He will tell you how to develop things in himself. Where the patience is not developing in my child, well, where should we turn towards? Not to people outside us and the therapist and the people who can give us consultation, but the child has already interviewed and seen that possibility and quality in us. And if my child is lacking in patience, well, I look within myself, because somewhere in me the child has saw it fit to learn it from us, and therefore is born to us. And therefore first the patience has to be brought out of ourselves. And this is an important thing. All the quality that the child needs, already the pass mark is given for us. We need to bring it out, which gives a tremendous amount of responsibility for us also. Now we have to bring out so many things, whichever one we see kind of lacking in our children, or it is still not yet there. And therefore, the Khalil Gibran says that they come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. Like I said, they are not our property in any sense. And even in terms of responsibility, we have to be careful that he is life's longing for itself. What is my responsibility? And while being with him, well, my responsibility is he has chosen me to be as a companion with him. And therefore, the best gift that I can give him is a companionship. And also, my responsibility is in bringing out things from within myself, which I could offer him so that he can choose or reject according to as he sees fit. So this is why they are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. It's if we, in our language we call it as an aspiration. The child is born to us and he is a personification of an aspiration to become something. The child, something deep within the child knows, and we don't know, and the child himself in his outer personality doesn't know, but he is nothing but an aspiration, a flame which is meant to become a kind of a forest fire, and he has chosen us as facilitators. And next, in that companionship, what is a give and take? How much are we supposed to give him and then teach him and then take from him? And this is what in the next paragraph Khalil Gibran says, you may give them your love. And we have to be very much understanding of what love is, because if I look back at my childhood, I know that I have been smothered with love, ye eating karo, and then or eating karo, and then almost as if love equals eating. And then I still remember my mother, if she makes me eat more, doesn't matter whether it is what I need or not. If she makes me eat more, she is so happy. And all the things that she want to feed, if I eat, well, that is bliss for her. But even the love that we have has to be of a different character. And one line expression of the mother, when somebody asks her, how are we supposed to love? How love? And she simply said, love is self-giving. So we are here, we make ourselves available. We give whatever we have, we can call as ourselves, and self-giving is love. Not expecting anything in return, not expecting that he will have to respond to us in a particular way. And then if I say, be patient, and he will have to be patient. And if I teach him this, he will have to learn. No, we are here to give, not to demand. And that's a beautiful expression of the mother. Love at its highest is nothing but self-giving. If we focus on that, then it becomes beautiful, because we are making ourselves available. The child who has chosen us knows what to take. He's not going to take everything from you. So all your capacities and capabilities and your talents, he's not going to. He is going to choose only what he will need, which already inwardly he senses it, and then we just have to facilitate it. So you may give them your life, but not your thoughts. For interesting. So I don't have to tell the child how he should look at things, how he should behave things, and give love. But don't put your thoughts into him that, array, this is how you have to do and this is how we have to do. And why? Because they have come with their own thoughts. We have to help them to discover and purify and refine them. So let us not put our thoughts, our way of looking at things, our opinions, our prejudices into them. And like somebody said, they are not vessel to be filled in. But they are much more. They have their own thought. We don't have to give them a thought. This is how. But there is something that we have to give, and we have to give unhesitatingly without any conditions, and that is love. So let's give the love that we have, but not our thoughts. Hey, aisa nahi karna hai. What are you? What will he think? And this is, do this. Aisa karo, aisa karo. Not. It's okay. But if we can help the child by being an example, making ourselves available, then the relationship works on a totally different level. And especially for the mothers, it's more difficult, because in a certain sense, you may house their bodies. So the mothers have actually housed their bodies, and therefore the connection is much stronger. For how long have they housed? Well, the father has been housing from outside. It's a totally different thing when you house a child from inside, which actually takes us to a completely different level. And therefore there is the ownership and the responsibility. Usually 10 guna zyada mothers ke saath in general, of course, not as a strict rule, because unless and until the father develops that capacity to get connected at a much deeper level, doesn't naturally happen. But the father can do something even from the moment of conception, and that is the connection which you can call it as the soul connection. Well, the mothers have the advantage. They are housing their bodies, but we are not here to house their souls. Their souls stand free. So what happens is, because we are housing the body, we have helped in the formation of the body of the child. A lot of our impulses and propensities, our own desires, our own way of things gets into the child, into the physical part of the child at the genetic level. So much so that, well, most often they look like us. The configuration of the atoms is whatever is physical, they so much resemble to us. The way we talk, the way we move, the way we stand, and the way, for example, your child in a very relaxed way sits. Somebody walks in and then suddenly we say, "Arey, your father also sits in the same way." How does it get into it? Genetically. And that is the importance of the mothers and the fathers too, because equally they are partners in passing on certain genetic information, which, if we have not been careful to develop the habits at which has gone into our genes, it could be a deterrent to the born to us. And now, right now, we are past that stage, so we cannot go back and change our genes so that we give a head start to the child in several habits which will be good for him or her, because we ourselves were struggling with marriage, and then how am I going to be a parent and other things. So here, when whatever we could pass on to the child genetically is fine, but if we cannot do, now there is a second influence which comes in, because the child is with us. So the environment in which the child grows up is completely created by us. For the child especially, mostly staying at home, or majority staying at home and at the school, at least half of the time when he stays with us in our home, the environment through which we can pass on quite a lot of things becomes the next responsibility, which even now you and me have towards our children. So what Khalil Gibran says is, you may house their bodies, but don't even think that you have housed their souls and you are making their souls grow. No, what happens in the womb is the body grows up and the soul is watching, overseeing, but the soul will begin to grow when at its own time, when after it has been taken birth. And interestingly, this difference is so important because we can fix the habits of the body, and because it's just passing on our habits to the child's habit physically, but not the soul habits, simply because for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. We have already been on this earth. We are already between 20 to 25 by the time when we took the first decision to give birth to a child. So 20, 25 years, we have already been on this earth, and a lot of things got harmonized with the world here. We have changed ourselves in order to fit ourselves into the world. And therefore, the growth of our soul is in a very hampered situation, but not the souls of our children, because they, at birth, directly, they are just come from the house of tomorrow. That is why one of the reasons why they are so rebellious. They are apparently not listening to us. And in a certain sense, it's good that they are not listening to us, simply because they have to resolve the contradiction. They are coming from tomorrow. You and I have no idea about tomorrow. Just go back 10 years and then think, would we ever have imagined that right now in 2020, a situation like COVID will come? So even in 10 years back, we could not have seen into the future. And therefore, we could not have prepared ourselves for the future, because what we have is the past that we carry. And that is why I say that based on the past, we cannot decide anything with that surety to the soul which comes from the house of tomorrow. And it's a beautiful phrase that he used. And because he is coming from the house of tomorrow, the way he looks at things, wants to interact with things will be so radically different from you and I who belong to the house of yesterday, because what we are today is a result of our past. And therefore, how do we radically change our approach? And even if we are not able to live in the future with our child, at least in not imposing the things of the past on the child, not to leave an impression of the past and the demands and requirements and the lifestyle of the past on the child, we have to be very, very careful. So the souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. And I think Devin shared something nice in the chat box. So I'm going to take a look at the chat box. Well, this is a prayer which Devin has shared. It's a prayer given by the mother to all the children, who have come from the house of tomorrow. It's a beautiful prayer. Goes like this: make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future that is to be born. So they are here to fight the battle of the future, not the battle which you and I have fought. Because you and I have fought a lot of battles with our parents, with the society that we lived in, and they are not here to fight the same battle. So let us not pass on our wisdom of fighting with our parents, our society to them, because they are here to fight the battles of tomorrow. And in that process, well, they are going to come across difficulties against the past that seeks to endure. Because all that is around them, us, relatives, society, all of us are products of the past. And these who have come from the house of tomorrow, well, they are going to find it difficult, and therefore they will have to fight against the past. One, they will have to fight a battle which is futuristic. Second, well, they will have to fight with the past in whatever form it comes. And they will be able to recognize that it is something that belongs to the past, whereas for us, that is all that we are. And why these two battles? So that the new things may manifest and we may be ready to receive them. So this is a prayer given to the children of the ashram school. And thanks, Devan, for sharing. We'll continue. What Khalil Gibran says: their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. We might think that we know something of tomorrow, but here is a categorical statement from Khalil Gibran. This house of tomorrow, na, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. Now, let's have it clear. Unless and until we have made special efforts to completely detach ourselves from the past, from our surroundings, and we train ourselves to glimpse and perhaps even live in the future, simply because it's not that only the children who have souls, we too have a soul which has come from the future. And therefore, if unless and until we turn ourselves completely towards getting things from the soul, every thought, every feeling, every impulse, every desire, every aspiration, if we don't get it from the soul, well, it's going to belong to the past, however good it may be for you and me. Now, this is the important thing. It may be good for me. We lived in the past. It has benefited us, but not necessarily for them. Because we, to put it simply, don't have a clue about where they have come from and what they are trying to manifest here. And therefore, this is what he says: their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. And therefore, one, we can undergo the stupendous sadhana to get in touch with our soul and then try to be futuristic. Or, array, look at the child, no? He has come from the future and he's living. Can we not be like, have that childlike freshness, and perhaps that will help us to get in touch with our own soul. Now, that's a beautiful sadhana. If we take the help of the child in being that freshness and innocent way of looking at things with the eyes of wonderment, perhaps it will put us in touch with the soul. So, You may strive to be like them. Look at the child and the freshness and the joy that is bursting out from him. So it's okay for us to be like them. And their capacity for learning, phenomenal. And their memory, it's a super memory that they have. Whereas half of our memory is already filled with all the wanted, unwanted, and the semi-wanted things. And they are just take the language, they are learning languages like 2000 words per day. That is the rate at which they are going, and it is phenomenal the way they are picking up things. So we have a help in front of us to get us connected with the soul. We may strive to be like them, but beautifully he says, seek not to make them like you. Like us means what? There's a time for working, there's a time for watching TV, there's a time for doing this, and then khana is a khana, and then this and that, and relaxation. Well, one look at us where how we relax ourselves and how we put ourselves into work and tense ourselves, and all that the child sees is why is he tensing himself and then later wanting to relax, and then why not everything be a kind of a joyous thing. And this is one of the things actually when I interacted with a child just a couple of weeks back, one of your children, only one of our Rainbow Dreams parent children, that he came with this beautiful thing that I want to play all the time. My mom is not letting me play. Simple. Now, that's what he calls as play, is that just exuberant exploration of the things that he want to explore and want to engage himself, and he is into it. And that is what so even what you and I call work, probably we want to teach him how to cook a dish, unless it is play, meaning unless the joy element of joy is there, now he is going to think that, okay, like how my father does, I'm going to tense myself up, and then probably afterwards my mom is going to relax me by probably cooking something which is likable by me. He gets into that getting tense and then relaxing mode. Whereas for children, everything has to be joyous. And once he gets into that mode, it's beautiful. And it is natural for the child to be playing. For him, it's everything is a play. Once he enters into sleep, dream is a play for him, because he can be so playful in his dreams, and he can be quite conscious of his dreams, by the way. And you and I, probably we got into the habit of forgetting the dream the moment we got up. But this is what mother calls about the sleep. It's a night school. And it's a school of play, exploration, discovery, and immense joy. And in fact, the immensity of joy cannot compare to our waking state, because in dream, we are much free. The burden of the body and its restriction of time, space, causality is not still there. So we can expand ourselves and experience things which are unthinkable for us to experience during daytime. And the children can glide into it. So sleeping is a joy. Eating has to be a joyful activity. And we will take up the eating part a little later, because one of the questions which I received from parents also is about eating, because they said that my mom is making me eat everything that she cooks. Whether how do we take care of that? We will look at it a little later. So we can strive to be like them. Look at the past where a child is supposed to become in the image of his father. Now that is not there anymore. Now we, the parents, will have to strive to be like their children, and it is important because that will put them in touch with their soul. And at times the style will be, bindas. Well, we have to learn it from him how to be bindas too, and not to enter into the mode of tensing ourselves and then later wanting to relax. So for life, interesting. So you may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For why? We are the past and the child is the future. Let not future become like the past. How beautiful it is. He is meant to be the future, and therefore it will be totally different. And that is what Khalil Gibran says. For Life goes not backward. By making him like us, he is actually going into the past and becoming the past. Life goes not backward, not tarries with yesterday, and we are yesterday. Then, who are these children? Well, and who are we? When we say we are the past, well, what is the role and the responsibility, which is the question that I brought up? Well, Khalil Gibran gives us a clue. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. So imagine a bow, imagine an arrow, and arrow is the action, center of our action, and the shooting forth of the arrow takes place with the help of the bow. And we are the bows. It's an interesting analogy because if there is a bow and if children are the arrows that are being sent forth, well, bow and arrow cannot be by themselves, isn't it? There has to be an archer who sets the direction and who is the master planner, and he is the one who probably chiseled the bow and probably setting forth the arrow also in one direction. So Khalil Gibran now brings in the third element, one child, two parents, and the third one is the archer. And he says, the archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite. So ye nishan hai. This is the path itself is a path of infinity, and one can get quite lost into deciding what am I supposed to become in my life, where am I supposed to go. But don't worry, because the master archer has already put the plan inside the child and also is ready to set the arrow forth, for which he is going to make use of us, the bows, and he is going to make us bend so much so that the more he can make us bend, the more he can shoot the arrow with that much initiation. And that is what all that we are. And we have to lend ourselves to be the launching pad, to put it simply. And that is what the archer does. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite and he bends you with his might. Why? So that his arrows may go swift and far. If we become too rigid as bow and unwilling to bend, just imagine that the arrow will have its problem of going swift and going far. So we have to allow ourselves to be bent by the archer. And I tell you, that's not an easy process to bend, to allow to be bent. And if it is not an easy process, well, are we supposed to grudgingly submit ourselves to this process? Not at all. There is a way of allowing ourselves to be bent. And that's what Khalil Gibran says in the next one. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. So that is how we temper our stiffness with the joyous bending, so that we allow ourselves to be bent. And you don't know how much free we have to be of things that make us stiff and rigid and put us in the past, so that we can allow ourselves to be bent. Almost 90, 95, 99% of what we think and do is already tempered by the past. And here is what he says: to allow ourselves to be bent, not according to apni marzi, but according to the marzi of the archer, is to be one of gladness. And then it is fine. Because what happens then? For even as we, in this entire story of bow and arrow and the archer, we are always putting the arrow as the center and hero of our story. So am I only a bow to help my child to just go forth? What is my own self-worth? And that is where the conclusion is, where Khalil Gibran brings us also into the picture, because he says, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. There is an equal love for the bow and the arrow. And once we touch this dimension, well, we enter into something which is so beautiful. And I want to bring in parallel of what Khalil Gibran has said poetically with what force and what deep spiritual insight which Sri Aurobindo says, because what Khalil Gibran has felt in his moment of inspiration and expressed, Sri Aurobindo saw it directly and saw it very vividly. And he says from Savitri, and this is what, when Sri Aurobindo looked at the future, there are the souls coming from the house of tomorrow, the souls who are coming down. And this is what he describes so vividly. He says, I saw the omnipotent. Who is the omnipotent? The archer here. I saw the omnipotent's flaming pioneers. So they are like, in Mahabharata, when the Yuddha happens, the flame arrows come, shook, shook like that. Like that, he saw the flaming pioneers, meaning the people who are going to make things so different. He says, I saw them. I saw them cross the twilight of an age. We are in the junction of an age, the past belonging to an age whose time has come, and the future we have no clue, not even in our dream, as Khalil Gibran says. And yet, Sri Aurobindo has seen them cross this twilight of an age. And from the house of tomorrow, the children have already come. What type of children are they? We don't see this possibility, because otherwise, if we confine ourselves only to what we can physically and emotionally see in front of ourselves, we will miss out on this possibility. And what Sri Aurobindo calls them, he calls them as the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn. Well, they are the people who will make this dawn happen. And they are already sun-eyed children with such a brightness that once they have taken birth, everything becomes a little dull, dark, and little gloomy because of the impact which is created when they who are the flaming pioneers, the moment they have taken up, they have as if stunned for a little bit of time. And let us not mistake that being stunned as a lack of possibility. The sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn, the great creators with wide brows of calm. We think they are not patient, they are restless, but just have to look into it. They are carrying an ocean of calmness within them, only they are a little bit stunned and they have to be helped to come out of that getting stunned phase, and then they will become aware that they are oceans of calm. I have to share with you something nice which one of my colleagues shared with the last week when I interacted with the children, and Subeda actually did it. So she said during this COVID time, the children started spending so much time in the kitchen also. So she started playing, and then she started teaching her child how to make a little small things. And in the process, lot of utensils got broken. And of course, the kitchen, it's her domain, is her area and not at the domain of the husband. So we are talking about one particular person. So every time one patram, one utensils fell and broke, it's part of, hey, the person who has shared it with me is right there. So it's a heartbreak. Every patram which I've been using for a long time, it breaks. It's a heartbreak for you. And it so happened that one day, our Sumedha broke her once. It happens once in a while, okay? Even though we are masters of our kitchen, it happens once. And do you know what her child came up and told her? This Sumedha has to share. I'm unmuting her. Just one time it happened. Sumedha, share what your child told you.
So she told me, Mummy, it's okay. See, it happens with everybody. So she knew that she has broken, and I had really, told her, Meher, you have to be careful. Please don't do this again and take care of it. She said, Mama, it happens with everybody. It's okay. And I was stunned.
Just imagine who is the ocean of calmness here. It's already there. And then when we get into an agitated mode, we try to impose it on the child. But they beautifully. They have not even brows of calm, wide brows of calm. And they are carrying a notion of that thing, which actually I tell you, it usually comes out when you have, for example, a pet. No, when you put them in a position, give them a chance to connect with another human being, for which, like how you are feeling responsible for your child, the child begins to feel responsible for a pet, and automatically the qualities of patience and not getting irritated, agitated, because the puppy is going to poop in the initial stages wherever it wants to, and not to scold too much, because the puppy doesn't know where to poop. That's it. It's not yet been habituated. So lot of things which we wanted to, it's already there in them. We facilitate, it comes out. And these, when they grow up to be such strong personalities, they are ready to break any barriers which will hold them back from expressing who they are. And therefore, Sri Aurobindo says, the great creators with wide brows of calm, the massive barrier breakers of the world, and wrestlers with destiny in her lists of will. Let's not try to tell them that, no, we are meant to be this is what we can do, this is our destiny, try to make the best out of it. Well, they are going to wrestle with whatever the society is going to say, and our task is to help them get ready for it by first loving, giving ourselves, and then helping them to develop whatever qualities which they might lead, because they are going to be at task, the laborers in the quarries of the gods. So the future is not yours and mine. Well, something is being prepared by the gods at a very grand proportion. And you and I, not even in our dreams, have any clue about it. And the children already carry that seed of their participation in it. And they are going to labor in the quarries of the gods. It's between them and the gods which are setting things up. And they have come as beautiful, the messengers of the incommunicable, the architects of immortality. Now, this is the child that we have right in front of us, and this is what we have to open up to. But this is on a grand scale, on a scale where we have to look at ourselves and then really feel within ourselves that we who are from the past, how are we supposed to facilitate the growth of somebody who has come from the house of tomorrow? First thing, learn from the child and learn the beautiful qualities that he or she has come from tomorrow, from the house of tomorrow, and prepare ourselves for it. So that is one of the first thing we open up to the children. And the second, let us not come with any preconceived ideas. And our past has helped us to grow, but they have a tremendous limitation for these children who will be working in the quarries of the gods, and we will have to get into that. And definitely, Jayashree says, definitely, they are our facilitators. So she's putting it the ulta way. So rather than we facilitating things for them, it is an equal task. They are also facilitating us to get rid of our fixed notions and our habit of living in the past. So we will take up a little bit of some tips which mother has said for the parents, and then probably we will conclude. So these are to be found in the book on education, the second chapter, it's on education. I'm going to quickly go through it because we have the whole background, but we need to conclude with some practical things too. For example, when I get up from my seat and when I confront my child, what am I supposed to do? First thing, material needs, they are essential, but they are not all. Roti, kapda, makan? Definitely. So food, clothing, shelter are not the only things we are meant to provide. There are emotional, mental, and spiritual needs. Spiritual needs, well, they have come from the house of tomorrow, and we will have to facilitate in them the qualities that are needed for tomorrow. How do we do it? That is the biggest question. The first thing, we educate ourselves. We try to put us in touch with that one element in us, which is also come from the house of tomorrow, which is our own souls, which is the only thing which is not conditioned by the way we grew up, by the society, by the 101 restrictions that we have ourselves around us. But if I can say that there is one part in me which is untouched by anything that I can see around, and that is the soul deep within me, and I will have to get in touch with it so that I become facilitator to the child who has come from the house of tomorrow. And the more I get in touch with my own soul and start developing the qualities which my soul has brought from the house of tomorrow to make me futuristic, the more these qualities are getting more and more expressed, you will find that the child will spontaneously begin to reflect these qualities. The only way I wanted to see in my child patience and this and that, well, get in touch with your soul. Allow these qualities to manifest in you, train yourselves, because we, with a little more grasp over our time and space and the everyday shows, we can organize ourselves better. And let us organize ourselves better. Oh, well, uh, we have a junior joining us. She will understand much more of what I'm saying. But for a child, it is so spontaneous to pick up these qualities and habits from us, not through our lecture, do this, but whenever we make it part of our life and lifestyle, then they are like a sponge put into a water. Whatever is the water outside, they are going to absorb. And as parents, our house is like a water, and the child as a sponge is going to absorb what we have to share. So all the beautiful things we want to see in our children, if we want to see it in our children, the easiest way is to start developing in us. We want an aesthetic sense to develop in him. Let us cultivate aesthesis. So Chitra will teach Shekhar, and Shekhar will teach Chitra back how to be aesthetic in everything, not only physically, but even in expressing our emotions. Can we be beautiful? And not only in expressing our emotions, even in the thoughts that we are having, can we not have thoughts that are beautiful, positive, encouraging, helpful? And when we take beauty and the aesthetic sense to that level, and as walking beauties, I would even call that, when a father and mother as walking beauties, with beauty in their way of seeing and organizing things, with beauty in their emotions and beauty in their thoughts, when they walk as beauties next to a child, the child starts absorbing the sense of beauty from directly from them, and the inherent sense of beauty in the child gets awakened. And this is the best way that what we want to get developed in the child, we start developing, putting into practice. And then we don't give lecture to the child. We allow the child to make mistakes, take only what he wants and she wants, and then allow the child to grow. So this is the importance of educating oneself, getting in touch with our soul. And bye, Devin. We are already 10 minutes past. So with a few more minutes, and once we cover these points, we will call it a day. Second one. Thank you, Devin. Bye. Second one, the beautiful things we want to develop. Well, there are a lot of bad habits we have picked up on the way, which I told you. The moment of getting tensed up and then needing relaxation. Getting tensed up and then lot of defects, impulses, weaknesses which we have picked up. And we need to work on them too if we do not want them to be reflected in our children too. And in that process, if we are patient with ourselves, I have so many things to develop. I don't have so many positive qualities. It will take me years and years. Well, be patient. When we are patient, automatically the quality of patience will get instilled in the child. And another one, very difficult, but very true. All the time sharing is what mother has said in that one chapter. Always tell the truth, but in a way accessible to the child. So truth need not be told in an adult language, but the same truth can be told in a way accessible to children. Even the greatest truth can be told. Even the told which we think that the child is not yet ready to understand, no, his brain has to mature. There's a way of telling to make it accessible to children, and especially narrations and stories. Mother has told the story of creation to children of the ashram, and I was amazed because the how the creation happened, even great Shankaracharya ji was having difficulty in comprehending. He called, no, this is not even real, it's a dream. Just imagine what Shankaracharya ji himself, with his superb and gigantic intellect, grappled with. That's truth so difficult to understand. Mother told it as a story, the entire story of creation. Using narrations and stories, we must make an effort to tell always this stories. And final but one, scold only when it is absolutely indispensable. Absolutely is bold, italics, so all the emphasis is given. And especially when we are scolding, first of all, we do it only when it is absolutely indispensable. Second, when we are doing it, let us not scold for a fault which we ourselves commit in secret. Just to give you an example, the food that we eat, how much we want to eat the food that we want, and being adults, we demand, we quietly. What about the children? And are we giving the same freedom to our children too? Well, it's a big question mark. And if the child doesn't eat, of course, we force him, Harry, eat karo, this is good for health, good for health. What are we doing? Well, we demand the food that we want and we enjoy masti. And that's interesting, because even if we look at ourselves carefully, we will find 100 things where we are imposing on the child which we ourselves are not following. This, if we start correcting ourselves, this is the best way of helping the child to rectify a wrong movement whenever it happens in him or him. And finally, we cannot be the same people who we were 10 years back. By 10 years back, even the last year, we have to be constantly exceeding our limits and capacities if we want to be with children in the most profitable way. This is a must. And this is what is going to help the child also to get absorbed from you this quest to exceed oneself. What I am today is better or must be better than what I was yesterday in some way. And what I will be tomorrow, my tomorrow's version has to be better than my today's self. And a constant growth and progress is as much essential for parents as it is for children. So we'll take a pause here. We have completed our my intended time, 1 hour and 14 minutes. And probably one sharing or one small question, if you have, we can take it up. But otherwise, I hope you could gather something from our interaction. So, Jayashree, glad we could have you.
Thank you so much, sir. Same here. Thank you, Preeti, for inviting me and sending me the invitation. It was excellent learning from you. Thank you so much.
All right.
A short introduction about Jayashree Bhaiya.
Yes.
She works in Matri Kiran, and she is the head facilitator for this special children there. But she's very good with her work. She's very loving. That's
very
her,
interesting, because
very
what
Thank
happens
you.
in these special children is more acute, because just imagine the soul coming from the house of tomorrow and not able to find equipment through which it can express itself, and that makes it all the more. And the best way of helping with them is we have to get in touch with that element which is futuristic in us, and we have to rely more heavily than the normal teachers and parents in order to be with children, because they are more special.
Yeah, yes,
They are called
very
special
true.
children, and
Very true.
the integral education is much more needs to be applied in the area of special children too. So Shekhar, Chitra, anything that you would like to share about your decision to have pet?
Yeah, that decision is made. The day we will when we shift to Pondicherry, there will keep pet.
Oh,
Because
lovely.
here from 5 people, 3 are not comfortable. Only
Okay.
me and Abir are okay. I mean, I am also a little bit. I am right now actually. My pet went away very soon, so I
Ah.
had that thing that they go away very soon, and then you have that setback.
Ah.
So
Now, this
I
is an important thing. I'll just quickly share with you how one, sometimes the pet leaves us, just physically goes somewhere else. The second one, most of the dogs and cats do die too. Now that is shocking because I used to have a puppy dog with whom I practically did everything, sleeping and eating and playing and everything. And that dog happened to die. I knew how much of it is a shock, but nobody has actually helped me to look at death as a part and parcel of life. It is at some point the children will encounter death, and when they encounter death, and we ourselves need to have a proper attitude, because what happens when somebody close to us dies? Well, they cease to live on the outside, they choose to live in our hearts. That is the difference. There is nothing like the person is disappearing. They do continue to exist only instead of outside. If we can help the children to understand that we can help them to live in our hearts, and also once a year or occasionally, we can help remember and help them to make the transition, because they have gone to take care of some other things which were left undone, and make it as part and parcel, not the the jamela which they make out of when somebody dies. I really wish that you people can come and see how death happens in the ashram. There no crying, no, it's part of life, and it's a beautiful process of send off. And send off, why send off? Because the other person has chosen to do some other work which could not be done here. And if you have to hold on to that other person, why have you gone? What have you done? That's not the way to approach all. And this has to be, we have to help the children to gain this way of looking at things. So if, not that it will happen or may have to happen, if a death happens, tell them that these people continue to live in our hearts, and it is because the other person has other things to take care of. It's never an end to anything. He just has gone to take care of other things, and we must send him off happily. And if he feels sad, then that other person will not feel like going and doing his things properly, and therefore we will have to do the send off with all goodwill and happiness in our heart. So thanks for that
I
occasion.
wanted to
Yes, Preeti.
Chitra and Shekhar, I also had promised my daughter that after I come to Pondicherry, I'll adopt a dog. So that there's quite a lot of similarity in that. And still, after 2 years, I was in Pondicherry. I didn't, in the sense, we didn't get a dog home. And but it was in these special times when COVID happened and we all were stuck at home, that suddenly a dog came around. It was not planned, but what I feel is that when someone comes, it could be a dog or it could be a person or any other human being. They have this special. They come with their soul, and so that brings such a difference in the whole way the whole family operates, and how we operate. We have these inhibitions in our mind, but something happens. So because I really feel the dog has its so much, or a cat, or it could be any other being, uh, and there is some magic that happens, and if it teaches us how to love very unconditionally. So I think whether Pondicherry or not Pondicherry, now I feel it is just our inhibition that stops, because we feel it's going to be an effort or the death or so many other factors. But there's a different learning altogether in this whole thing. That's what I wanted to say.
No, Preeti Didi, but here people, I have told you now, amongst 5, 3 are not comfortable. Only me and Abir are okay. So these three are so much scared, so much hygiene problem they have. So in Pondicherry, amongst 3, 2 will be okay. So then we'll keep.
Yeah, I
to
guess.
the to the others, Chitra, you read the poem "Children" by Khalil Gibran, and
Yeah.
then leave hope for the best.
I think the
But I'm
mathematics changes sometimes, but yes, you have to just leave it sometimes. Yeah.
So I'm glad we could get together for a very informal interaction. And let's take this idea that our children they have come from the house of tomorrow. We, as of now, outwardly belong to the past and embody it, but within us too, there is an element which belongs to the future. The only way of truly understanding the child is to get in touch with that futuristic element in us, the soul within us, what mother calls us a psychic being. There is no other way we could truly understand and help the children. So with that, we will conclude. Thank you so much for spending your time. And
Thank you, Shivda. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks and bye to all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
Preeti
Jash.
Didi. Bye,
Bye.
Sumita. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.